It's just your Aussie ass.
Are you okay?
Tommy! Yes!
Here.
I'm suggesting that you and Audrey.
We're just trying to be nice.
So you take explosive, get it out. Are you gonna catch
Must be exhausting.
You broke my leg!
Sasha is inside her tent with her climbing partner, Tommy, carefully treating her sore fingers after days of rough climbing. They are high up in the mountains, surrounded by snow and bright sunlight. Even though her hands are clearly taking a beating, Sasha is eager to keep going. She tells Tommy to get ready so they can continue the climb. A little later, the two of them are back on the icy rock face, moving upward together and enjoying the challenge. For a while, it almost feels playful. They laugh, push forward, and climb through the white mountain landscape like they have done many times before. But then Sasha suddenly slips and drops back. Luckily, she is not badly hurt, but the fall irritates her. This particular section has beaten her before, and she hates that it keeps stopping her. Tommy tells her not to rush it. He says she should breathe, slow down, and try again when she is ready. Sasha takes another shot at it, but once again she fails at the same place. Tommy suggests they stop for the day and come back to it later, but Sasha refuses to quit. She keeps trying again and again, pushing herself harder each time, but the result does not change. The weather begins shifting around them, and a storm starts building in the distance. Finally, with conditions getting worse, Sasha accepts that they need to stop for now. Back at their camp, Tommy opens up about how worried he is. He tells Sasha that her fearlessness scares him sometimes. He is not sure how many dangerous trips he has left in him. Sasha brushes it off, saying he always talks like this whenever things get difficult, but Tommy is serious. He says luck does not last forever, and sooner or later it runs out. He points to his lucky compass as if it is warning him. Sasha gets annoyed and pushes the idea away. After that, they decide it is time to descend. As they move down the mountain, they watch the storm intensify. Ice and debris begin breaking loose from above, crashing down around them. They decide to stay close to the mountain wall and keep their heads low for protection. Tommy wants them to move lower because there is a safer ledge beneath them. Sasha goes first, lowering herself carefully, but just as Tommy begins to follow, larger rocks start falling from the mountain. One of them strikes him hard and he loses control. Tommy drops and Sasha catches his weight through the rope. She screams at him to wake up, begging him to respond because his body is dragging both of them down. But Tommy does not move. Sasha fights to hold on, but the force is too much. Her grip begins to fail. Inch by inch, the rope slips from her control until she can no longer stop him. Tommy falls all the way down the mountain. Sasha watches helplessly as the man she loved dies beneath her, while she is left clinging to the rock, forced to survive. 5 months later, Sasha is in Australia. She drives toward a remote canyon campsite, still carrying Tommy's compass with her. When she arrives at the ranger's office, the officer asks whether she plans to go into the area alone. He clearly thinks it is a bad idea. He warns her that many people who entered that wilderness never came back. But Sasha has already made up her mind. She signs in anyway and continues with her plan. Afterwards, she stops at a small supermarket. Inside, a man greets her casually. Sasha replies with a quick hey and tries to move away, but he starts following her through the store. One of his friends joins him, and soon the two men corner her near the checkout counter. Their behavior is uncomfortable and threatening. Another man at the counter notices what is happening while talking about how his beef jerky is selling. Seeing the situation, he steps in and tells the men that Sasha probably already has everything she needs. The men finally leave her alone. The stranger apologizes for them, and Sasha ends up buying a packet of his beef jerky before leaving. Outside, Sasha sits in her car, struggling to understand her map. She notices the same helpful man nearby and calls him over. He asks whether she wants the easy route or the difficult one. Sasha tells him she just wants the best route. He explains the road to her and then gives his own recommendation. He suggests starting from Blackstone Bay and tells her about a nearby camping spot that is usually quiet because not many people know it exists. Sasha takes his advice and begins her journey. By evening, she reaches a lake and sets up camp beside the water. She keeps pepper spray close just in case. Unfortunately, the men from the supermarket arrive there too. They are hunters traveling as a group after killing a deer. They invite Sasha to come over and join them, but she keeps her distance and gets back into her car. Soon, one of the men walks up to her window with an unsettling grin. He tells her they are only trying to be friendly, then he finally leaves. Later that night, Sasha hears them packing up and driving away. Relieved, she finally relaxes. The next morning, Sasha takes out her raft and heads onto the river. The current pulls her along quickly, carrying her through the canyon. She stops along the way to climb up some rocks, jump into the water, and enjoy the peaceful isolation. Eventually, she reaches the area near Blackstone Bay. There, she notices scattered belongings that seem to have belonged to campers who may have gone missing. Sasha sets up camp near the lake and sits down to eat some of the beef jerky she bought earlier. To keep her supplies safe, she hangs her belongings high in a tree before going to sleep. But when she wakes the next morning and steps outside, her bag is gone. As if that is not bad enough, she is terrified when she discovers a snake inside her tent. With no better option, Sasha gets back on her raft and continues farther down the water. Soon she comes across a small camp that looks like someone is currently staying there. She searches around and eventually finds the person living there. To her surprise, it is the polite man from the supermarket. Both of them are glad to see a familiar face. He introduces himself as Ben, and Sasha tells him her name. Ben asks whether she is enjoying the trip. Sasha explains that something stole her bag during the night, and her phone and food were inside it. Ben says it was probably wombats. He adds that he always brings twice as many supplies as he needs, so he can share some of his own. Sasha thanks him, and Ben asks if she is hungry. He offers her some fish. At first, she politely refuses, but he insists, so she sits down. Ben starts preparing the fish while they talk. He notices that she tried his beef jerky, which is called Jono's. Sasha asks why he named it that, and Ben explains that it was named after his mother. He then shows Sasha how he collects fresh water from trees and lets her drink some. Sasha asks where he is originally from. Ben tells her his mother brought him to Australia when he was a child. Sasha guesses that he must be from Britain. Ben laughs and, while stabbing the fish, admits she is right. He studies her for a moment and guesses that she is a mountain climber. Sasha tells him she is finished with climbing. Ben assumes it must be because of a breakup. He imagines that she used to climb with her partner. They separated, and that is what brought her out here to camp along the river. Sasha tells him he has it completely wrong. She is not out here because of some failed relationship. She came to escape everything, the pressure, the memories, the constant noise of the world. And while talking about that kind of noise, she mentions the hunters from the supermarket who showed up near her campsite the night before. Ben says most hunters are not like those men. According to him, real hunters respect the land, understand the animals, and use what they take. They do not treat the wilderness like an excuse to get drunk and act tough with their friends. Sasha says they were not really dangerous. They were just trying to intimidate her. Ben nods and says he knows. In fact, he saw the whole thing, and he thinks she handled it almost perfectly. His words make Sasha go quiet. Then Ben adds that she was smart because she did not give them a reason to hurt her. Sasha looks at him, confused, and asks what he means. Ben calmly admits he was there. He says he was watching because he thought a woman alone in the woods might need help. Then he suddenly laughs and tells her she is special, just like his mother. The mood changes instantly. Sasha lowers the plate, uneasy now, and decides it is time to leave without making a scene. But as she moves away, Ben stops her. That is when she notices something disturbing. He is wearing her bracelet. Ben goes inside his den, then throws a bag toward her. A moment later, he steps back out holding a crossbow and a speaker. He starts playing a song. Then, almost casually, he tells Sasha he has replaced all her essentials. He glances at her shoes and says she should manage just fine. Then he explains the rules. She has until the song ends to run as far away from him as possible. After that, Ben starts dancing. Sasha grabs the bag and bolts into the wilderness. She races back to her raft, jumps in, and paddles hard into the river. Behind her, the song slowly fades into the distance. Then Ben starts running too. The river carries Sasha toward a waterfall. She goes over the edge and crashes into the water below, striking her head beneath the surface. The impact separates her from the raft. Dazed and panicked, she fights her way to shore and pulls herself out, but she cannot stop. She runs again, pushing through the thick jungle and scrambling up rocks. Then she hears voices. It sounds like people talking nearby. Desperate, Sasha climbs toward the sound and calls out for help. But when she reaches it, she realizes the voices are coming from a phone playing a video. On the screen is the missing family, cheerfully saying hello to Ben. Before Sasha can fully process what that means, an arrow slams into the rock near her. She looks up and sees Ben standing above the cliff. He has found her. Sasha runs again. She tears through the jungle as Ben follows, firing arrows from different angles. The chase becomes relentless. Sasha keeps moving, ducking, and sprinting through trees while arrows cut through the air around her. She manages to get farther ahead, but then one arrow pierces straight through her bag. The force throws her off balance, and she tumbles over the edge of a cliff. She rolls violently down the slope until she crashes into the river below. Gasping, she lifts her head above the water and tries to swim against the current, but the canyon water is too powerful. It drags her through the narrow passage until she finally reaches a calmer stretch. Sasha pulls herself onto land, exhausted and soaked. She searches through the bag and finds a t-shirt, which she quickly puts on. She also finds something to eat and drinks some water. Then she takes out her pepper spray and keeps it close, knowing it may be the only defense she has. After catching her breath, she starts running again and soon finds herself trapped between dark canyon walls. With no easy path forward, Sasha relies on the skills she once tried to leave behind. She begins climbing. Without proper gear and after months away from climbing, she struggles. Her hands slip, her body trembles, and every movement feels dangerous. But she keeps going, carefully working her way upward until she finally reaches the top and steps back into open daylight. From that higher point, Sasha can see across the entire area. She continues walking until she reaches a tree and stops. She pulls out her binoculars and spots her raft in the distance. For a moment, it feels like she might have a way out. Then she hears Ben's hunting scream echo through the wilderness, loud enough to send birds scattering into the sky. Sasha turns toward the sound and sees him running in her direction. She freezes, then she looks again through the binoculars. This time, Ben is standing completely still, staring straight at her with a smile. Sasha immediately runs. The hunter charges after her, and she scrambles back down from the place she had climbed. She hides between the rocks, trying to stay out of sight. Holding herself still is difficult, but she forces herself not to move. Ben reaches the area and looks down, searching for her. Sasha is just outside his line of sight. After a tense moment, he moves on. Only when she is sure he is gone does Sasha quietly crawl out of her hiding place. She takes off through the jungle again. Eventually, she reaches a place where music is playing. She raises the binoculars and sees the raft. Nearby, Ben is preparing to dive into the water completely naked. Seeing this as her best chance, Sasha decides to risk it. She slips into the water as quietly as possible and swims toward the raft. Inch by inch, she reaches it without being noticed. She tries to untie the knot holding it in place, but it will not come loose. With no time to waste, she decides to pull the whole anchor free. She dives down, trying to uproot it from below, but there is a trap hidden underwater. It snaps onto her leg. Sasha screams, and the sound instantly alerts Ben. He quickly pulls on his trousers and rushes toward her. Sasha manages to get to the shore and tries to free the pole, but when she sees Ben running straight at her, she has no choice. She dives back into the water. Ben grabs the chain and starts pulling her toward him. Just as he gets close, Sasha sprays him in the face with the pepper spray. He recoils in pain, and Sasha immediately tries to loosen the chain from her trapped leg. But it is stuck against the rock. Meanwhile, Ben stumbles into the river, washing his burning eyes in the water. Sasha notices the crossbow resting just beyond the rock. For one brief second, it looks like she might be able to grab it. But before she can reach it, Ben yanks the chain hard and pulls her back toward him. He drags her close, and this time, before Sasha can reach for the pepper spray again, Ben takes control of the crossbow himself. He points it at her and tells her to throw the spray away. Sasha has no choice. She tosses it aside. Ben kicks it farther out of reach, then slowly moves toward her trapped leg. He crouches near the underwater snare and removes it from her ankle. Once she is free, he orders her to stand. Sasha looks at him, shaken and furious, and asks if this is some kind of game to him. Ben calmly tells her it is not a game, it is a ritual. Later, Sasha is back inside Ben's den, tied tightly by both her wrists and ankles. While she struggles in the darkness, Ben wanders through the jungle gathering fruit. When he returns, he offers her one and tries to feed it to her, as if nothing about the situation is horrifying. Then he asks whether she dislikes being tied up. Sasha stares at him and tells him there is something deeply wrong with him. Ben reminds her that he gave her a choice earlier, the easy way or the hard way. That night, rain falls outside while Sasha remains trapped in the same place. Ben sits at a distance, watching her quietly. He begins talking about rituals again, saying they matter because they remind people who they truly are. Then he asks whether she has ever heard of tribes that file their teeth into sharp points. The next morning, Sasha is on a boat with him. Her hands are still bound, and she asks where he is taking her. Ben says he will explain later. Sasha, trying to loosen her restraints, asks if he is not going to explain the rules this time. Instead, Ben tells her he found her name in the ranger's register and looked her up. He knows about Tommy. He knows Sasha's climbing partner died in the mountains. Sasha says it was just a tragic accident, but Ben pushes back. He says the reports describe Tommy as an experienced climber, and to him, something about the story does not add up. Sasha insists accidents happen. As she speaks, she notices an iron bar near her feet. Quietly, she tries to move toward it without drawing attention, but Ben catches the movement immediately. Without hesitation, he shoves her off the boat. Sasha crashes into the river. Ben keeps her chained to the boat and drags her through the water as the current pulls her helplessly behind him. She has no control, no way to fight the river, and no way to free herself. Eventually, they reach a calmer area. Ben hauls her out and brings her to the edge of a gorge. He gives her climbing gear, making it clear they are going down together. Still restrained, Sasha has no real choice but to obey. The two of them descend into the gorge, sliding down into a hidden cave below. At the bottom, they land in water. Ben drags her through it and leads her deeper inside. Then Sasha sees something that stops her cold: bodies. Several of them are hanging inside the cave. Sasha is horrified, but Ben keeps pulling her forward. He explains that some tribes believe a hunter can capture the spirit of their prey by eating its liver. Then he asks if she remembers the family she saw in the video on the phone. He says they did not fight the way she did. As Sasha looks around, the full nightmare becomes clear. Organs and body parts have been cut away from the victims. Nearby, she sees packets of beef jerky. Then she understands. The jerky is made from human flesh. Sasha panics and tries to get away, but Ben drags her into a corner. His voice becomes strangely quiet as he asks whether she really thinks something is wrong with him. Terrified, Sasha chooses her words carefully. She tells him she thinks many people must have hurt him. She says she is sorry for everything that happened to him, trying to reach whatever human part might still exist inside him. Then Ben puts his fingers into his mouth and removes his fake teeth. Underneath them are his real teeth, sharpened into terrifying points. He takes Sasha's hand and places it near his mouth, letting her feel how close he is to biting her, but then he lets go. A moment later, he runs off, leaving her alone in the cave. Sasha quickly starts looking around. Among the disturbing things in the den, she notices a photograph that appears to show Ben's mother. Before she can do much else, Ben returns and drags her to another spot. He hangs her up by her wrists, though her feet can still barely touch the ground. Then Ben begins stirring a strange liquid, saying it is part of the ritual. Sasha remembers the photograph and carefully brings it up. She asks if the woman in the picture is his mother. Then she says his mother looks just like him. Ben smiles. He steps closer, softening as he repeats the affectionate things his mother used to call him. Sasha forces herself to smile along with him, keeping him talking. Ben moves nearer and says his mother was special, just like Sasha. Then he reveals she was the first person he did it to. He embraces Sasha. The moment he gets close enough, Sasha makes her move. She clamps onto him with her legs and bites down hard on his ear until it bleeds. Ben screams and thrashes in pain, trying to pull away. In the struggle, the rope holding Sasha snaps. Ben grabs her shirt, but Sasha slips out, tearing the fabric as she breaks free. He catches the chain and yanks her back, but Sasha pulls against it with everything she has. She manages to escape into the water. Ben charges after her. He grabs the end of the chain and ties it around her waist, trying to keep her under his control. But the fight carries them into the rushing water, and suddenly both of them are swept away. They tumble down with the current. Underwater, Ben slams his head hard against the rocks. The rope suddenly catches on a fallen tree log, stopping Sasha in the water and leaving her trapped. Gasping for air, she scrambles back toward the snag, trying desperately to free herself from the chain, but it will not loosen. Finally, she manages to untangle the rope from the log, and both she and Ben surface together. Ben is still unconscious. Sasha grabs a rock and starts smashing at the chain, hoping to break it apart. But no matter how hard she hits, the metal refuses to give. Then Ben begins to wake up. Sasha rushes back to him and forces his face beneath the water, trying to drown him before he can recover. But Ben fights upward, pushing his head out of the river. Sasha changes tactics and tries to choke him instead, but even injured and dazed, he is strong enough to shove her away. She reaches for another rock, but Ben still has control of the rope. He drags himself toward her, crawling across the wet ground, then overpowers her. He gets on top of her and starts strangling her. Sasha struggles beneath him, weakening fast, her hand searching for anything that might save her. Just when it looks like she is about to die, Ben freezes. For a moment, he seems to see his mother in her face. Instead of finishing her, he gently reaches toward her, as if trying to caress her. Sasha uses the hesitation instantly. She punches him away, then grabs the rock and slams it into his leg again and again. Ben screams and slaps her off, dragging himself away from her. Sasha clutches her bleeding nose while Ben cuts open his trousers to inspect the damage. His leg bone is broken. Both of them collapse onto the sand, exhausted and wounded, as evening settles over the canyon. Trying to keep herself steady, Sasha mocks him and says he must have had one terrifying dentist. Then she wonders if he ate that person too. After a pause, she asks if the darkness ever makes him feel depressed. Then Sasha begins talking about Tommy. She says when he fell, his weight was pulling both of them down. She had to let him go. But the worst part is that she will never know if he was already dead or if he might still have been alive when she released the rope. Ben listens in silence. Sasha admits Tommy did not even want to be on that mountain anymore. He was tired of pushing their luck, but she did not listen to him. The next morning, Sasha looks up at the massive rock wall ahead of them. Ben's wound has already started turning bad, and infection is setting in. Sasha asks about the jungle path behind them, wondering if there is another way out. Ben tells her it would take 12 days on foot to reach the road. Sasha knows they do not have that kind of time. She tells him she has to climb the wall. Either they climb today, or she waits for him to die from infection, because that is exactly where he is headed. She approaches him, but Ben holds a knife out toward her. Sasha tells him she can help stabilize his leg with a knot. She says she will need to make a harness for him and pull him up the rock. Then she asks him to remove her cuffs. Ben says he will unlock them once they reach the wall. They begin moving. At the base of the climb, Sasha builds him a harness. Ben warns her that if she tries to drop him, he will tear her off the wall with him. Then he unlocks her cuffs, though he keeps the two of them tied together. They start climbing. The ascent is brutal. Sasha pulls herself upward, with Ben hanging below and depending on her strength. Once they are high enough that he cannot clearly see what she is doing, Sasha tries to free herself from the rope connecting them. But Ben notices and yanks her down hard. Sasha steadies herself and continues climbing. As they rise higher, Ben asks her whether Tommy looked like he was flying when he fell. Sasha does not answer. She just keeps climbing, forcing herself toward the ledge above. At last, she pulls herself over the edge and out of Ben's view. Quickly, she ties the harness rope around a tree log, then loosens the rope attached to her own body. Below, Ben senses something is wrong. He starts pulling on the rope, screaming threats at her. Sasha hangs from the log while he drags with all his strength, but the harder he pulls, the more the knot around her loosens. Finally, Sasha slips free. She gets to her feet, leaving Ben stranded alone on the rock face below. Then she walks to the log and unties the rope holding him. Ben drops. He falls to his death. Now Sasha still has one final challenge left. She has to climb the rest of the rock wall without ropes, without proper support, and with her body already battered. Her feet are injured, but she keeps moving. Inch by inch, she forces herself upward. At one point, her foot slips, and she is left hanging from the edge. For a terrifying moment, it looks like she might fall too. But Sasha gathers every bit of strength she has left and pulls herself over. She lies there, breathing hard, finally safe. Later that evening, Sasha continues walking until a passing car spots her. The people inside take her to the forest ranger, where she tells him she knows where the missing people are. A rescue operation begins immediately, and the truth spreads through the news. The people everyone believed had vanished in the wilderness were not simply lost. They had been hunted by a serial killer. Sasha turns off the news report and goes to the beach. Tommy's compass is still with her. She holds it, kisses it goodbye, and throws it into the sea. Then Sasha sits quietly on the sand, surrounded at last by peace, silence, and open air. Apex is the kind of Netflix thriller that lands between two completely different reactions. For one viewer, it is exactly the lean, tense survival movie they wanted to find while scrolling through a platform packed with forgettable releases. It is star power, wilderness danger, a clean thriller hook, a short runtime, and enough intensity to work as a solid Friday night watch. It is not trying to reinvent cinema or pretend to be a deep psychological masterpiece. It simply throws a woman into the wild, puts danger behind her, and keeps the pressure moving until the end. And for that viewer, Apex works. It is watchable, polished, visually strong, and occasionally genuinely tense. Charlize Theron brings real physical commitment to the role. Taron Egerton steps into darker territory, and the survival thriller structure is easy to follow. When the film finds its rhythm, it becomes exactly what it promises. A tense cat-and-mouse ride through dangerous terrain, but then there is the other reaction. For another viewer, Apex feels like the same survival formula in new scenery: the isolated protagonist, the dangerous stranger. The wilderness chase, the predictable setup and payoff, the familiar streaming thriller package where everything looks expensive enough, moves fast enough, and sounds dramatic enough, but never feels original enough to stay with you after it ends. That is what makes Apex so divisive. It is not bad enough to dismiss, but not distinctive enough to escape the shadow of stronger films in the genre. It sits in that middle ground where the craft is visible, the performances have moments, the locations are striking, and the basic experience is entertaining, yet the story feels like something we have already watched before. Depending on what you bring to it, that can either be enough or nowhere near enough. If you want a straightforward survival thriller, Apex has value. It gives you danger, pursuit, physical struggle, wilderness scenery, and a villain who keeps the movie moving. It benefits from lowered expectations. Press play, let it carry you for 90 minutes, and enjoy the ride for what it is. But if you want originality, emotional depth, or a thriller that truly gets under your skin, the cracks show fast. The movie is tense but shallow, stylish but familiar, engaging but rarely surprising. It has enough energy to keep you watching, but not always enough substance to make you care deeply. So the opening verdict is simple. Apex is a polished, divisive streaming survival thriller that delivers a decent rush, but not a lasting impact. Some will call it a gripping Netflix surprise. Others will call it another disposable piece of genre recycling. Honestly, both reactions make sense. Apex is not a complete failure, far from it, but it is also not the peak its title promises. At the center of Apex is a premise that sounds simple, but has all the ingredients for a brutal survival thriller. Sasha, played by Charlize Theron, is not introduced as a helpless victim. She is an adrenaline junkie, a climber, someone used to danger, height, pressure, and physical challenge. That instantly makes the film more interesting than a basic stranger in danger story. Sasha does not stumble into trouble without skills or instincts. She understands risk. She knows fear. She already lives close to the edge. But the film does not begin with the hunt. It begins with loss. Sasha is climbing with Tommy, played by Eric Bana, and their dynamic quickly shows history. He seems tired of this life. He wants this climb to be the last one. She pushes him, teases him, calls him old, and the scene carries that familiar tension between someone still addicted to the rush and someone who has started to feel its cost. Then tragedy hits. Tommy dies and Sasha is left carrying that weight. That grief becomes the emotional doorway into the rest of the film. Sasha travels to Australia, Tommy's birthplace, and what begins as a personal journey turns into something far more dangerous. On paper, it is a clean setup. A grieving woman enters the wilderness alone, trying to process what she has lost, and instead finds herself trapped in a nightmare. The landscape becomes more than a backdrop. It becomes a test. Every river, cliff, trail, and stretch of isolated bush becomes part of the battlefield. And then comes Ben. At first, he does not appear as the obvious threat. That misdirection is part of the film's game. Sasha meets creepy men along the way, the kind of characters a thriller uses to pull your attention one way while the real danger moves in from another. Ben enters with charm. He feels like the safer presence, the approachable stranger, the one who understands the land and might offer connection when Sasha is at her most vulnerable. But once she is isolated, the mask drops. Ben reveals himself as the true predator, turning the wilderness into a hunting ground and Sasha into the target of a twisted ritual. This is where Apex fully becomes a cat-and-mouse survival thriller. The grief story shifts into a physical fight for survival. Sasha is no longer just trying to escape her past. She's trying to survive the present, and that is the strongest idea in the premise. Can someone built for danger endure danger when it is no longer chosen? Sasha is used to climbing mountains, chasing adrenaline, and testing her limits on her own terms, but being hunted changes everything. Adventure is controlled danger. Survival is chaos. In adventure, you prepare for the mountain. In survival, the mountain is not the only thing trying to kill you. The film uses that shift to turn Sasha's solo journey into a nightmare of isolation. There is no crowd, no easy rescue, no comfort, no safety net. The wilderness cuts her off from ordinary life, and Ben's pursuit turns every decision into instinct. She has to think fast, move faster, and use whatever is around her to stay alive. That is why the premise works, even when the story feels familiar. A lone woman, a remote landscape, a charming psychopath, and a hunt that becomes more personal as it continues. None of these ingredients are new, but they are effective. The film understands the primal appeal of this kind of thriller. It strips the story down to fear, endurance, and the desperate need to keep moving. The weakness is the grief element. It matters to the setup, but it is not explored as deeply as it could have been. Sasha's loss gives the movie a reason to send her into the wilderness, but emotionally, it sometimes feels more like a trigger than a fully developed inner journey. The film wants her grief to carry weight, but once the chase begins, the survival mechanics take over. Still, as a foundation, the premise is strong. Apex gives us a woman already defined by physical risk, breaks her emotionally through tragedy, sends her into a remote landscape tied to that loss, and then forces her into a violent game where every skill she has may be the difference between life and death. It is grief turned into isolation turned into danger, and danger turned into a brutal wilderness hunt. That is the hook that keeps the movie alive. What makes Apex immediately recognizable is that it does not hide its genre DNA. This is a survival thriller built from familiar bones. A lone person enters the wilderness. A stranger becomes a threat. Nature stops being beautiful and starts becoming hostile. The chase begins. Every river, cliff, tree line, and hidden path becomes part of the danger. The title, stars, and polished Netflix surface may be new, but the language of the story belongs to a tradition viewers already know well. At its core, Apex is playing in the territory of the most dangerous game, the classic idea of a human being hunted for sport. Ben is not attacking Sasha out of impulse. He turns the hunt into a ritual, a performance, a twisted test of control. That gives the film a familiar predator and prey structure. Sasha is not just escaping a random killer, she is trapped inside someone else's game. And the influences are impossible to miss. The river sequences immediately recall films like Deliverance and The River Wild, where water is not just scenery, but a source of fear, momentum, and helplessness. Rapids have a specific cinematic power because once a body is caught in the current, control disappears. The landscape moves faster than the character can think. Apex understands that force. It uses the river to give the survival story movement, danger, and physical exhaustion. Then there is the harsher hunted-in-the-wilderness energy that brings Wolf Creek into the conversation. That comparison is not just about Australia as a setting. It is about remote places where normal rules fall away, isolation creates vulnerability, and the villain's cruelty becomes part of the landscape. Apex may not have the same raw, grimy edge, but it borrows from that same fear. Once you are out there, nobody is coming quickly. The film also sits close to movies like Hush and Alone, where the tension depends on whether both sides of the chase feel believable. These stories only work when the hunter and the hunted create pressure against each other. The victim cannot feel passive, and the predator cannot feel cartoonish. There has to be a constant push and pull, where every move matters, every mistake costs something, and survival depends on intelligence as much as endurance. That is one reason Apex creates such split reactions. Some viewers feel it does enough with those influences to stay tense and entertaining. Others feel it never fully escapes them. Instead of feeling like a fresh evolution of the genre, it can feel like a remix of stronger films. You can also feel the connection to A Perfect Getaway and Whiteout, stories where location and danger are tightly linked, trust becomes unstable, and the environment itself creates suspicion. Apex uses that same structure of misdirection. The obviously creepy people are not always the real danger, while the charming presence becomes the threat hiding in plain sight. Beyond individual titles, Apex fits into a larger modern streaming pattern. It echoes films like Nowhere and Don't Move, where a woman already carrying emotional pain is trapped in an extreme survival situation and must rely on physical strength, instinct, and whatever tools she can find. These movies often strip the story down to one question: how much can one person endure before they break? That question is effective. It is cinematic. It is easy to understand, but it is also very familiar now. That is the challenge Apex faces from the start. It is not using a bad formula. The formula is strong because it is primal. Being hunted is one of cinema's simplest fears. Being hunted in the wilderness makes it even stronger because there is nowhere safe to hide. Every sound could be danger. Every shadow could be movement. Every route could become a trap, but familiarity cuts both ways. For viewers who love this genre, those ingredients may be enough. The movie gives them the chase, the wilderness, the villain, the survival struggle, and the physical pressure they came for. It feels like comfort food for thriller fans, intense, simple, and easy to settle into. For viewers looking for reinvention, those same influences become a problem. Instead of homage, they can feel like imitation. Instead of building on the legacy of survival thrillers, Apex sometimes borrows the shape without matching the impact. It has the river danger, the isolated woman, the charming predator, the psychological game, and the physical ordeal. But it does not always find a fresh emotional or narrative angle to make those pieces feel surprising. That is why the film's genre DNA is both its strength and its weakness. Apex knows what kind of movie it wants to be. It understands the appeal of a stripped-down wilderness hunt. It knows the power of a beautiful landscape turning hostile. It knows why audiences respond to stories about survival, pushed into extreme danger. But it also reminds us of too many other movies, while rarely making us forget them. So when Apex works, it works because the survival thriller formula still has power. When it falls short because that formula has been done before, and often with sharper teeth. The biggest problem with Apex is not the premise. The premise works. A grieving climber enters the Australian wilderness, meets a charming stranger, and slowly realizes she has walked into a deadly hunt. That is a strong thriller setup. It has isolation, danger, physical stakes, psychological pressure, and a lead character capable enough to fight back. On paper, that is more than enough to build a tense, memorable survival film. The problem is that Apex rarely makes that setup feel new. From the beginning, the movie has a habit of showing its cards too early. You can almost feel the screenplay planting pieces in front of you and waiting for you to notice them. When Sasha struggles with a certain part of the climb early on, it does not feel like a natural character moment. It feels like a signpost. The film is quietly telling you, remember this because it will matter later. And sure enough, it does. Exactly when expected, exactly how expected. That kind of structure is not automatically bad. Thrillers need setup and payoff. Survival movies especially depend on early details becoming crucial later. But the best films make those payoffs feel satisfying, not mechanical. They hide the machinery. They let the audience connect the dots just late enough to feel clever. Apex does not always manage that. Instead, many of its turns feel like they are moving along a track that has already been laid down. The creepy locals appear. The charming guy becomes dangerous. The wilderness turns into a battlefield. The heroine is pushed to impossible limits. The villain keeps finding her whenever the plot needs him to. The final challenge arrives, and by then, there is little doubt where the story is going. That predictability drains the film of danger. In a thriller like this, fear depends on uncertainty. We need to feel that anything could happen. We need to believe the movie might take a harsher turn, make a bolder choice, or truly punish a mistake. But Apex often feels too safe for a movie about survival. It wants the rush of danger without fully embracing the unpredictability that makes danger frightening. That is where the lack of originality becomes impossible to ignore. This does not feel like a film built from a fresh idea. It feels like familiar survival thriller pieces arranged into a clean, polished package, a little hunted-in-the-woods tension, a little grief-driven motivation, a little river survival, a little psycho-villain performance, a little final test of endurance. None of these elements are bad on their own, but together they feel too recognizable. For some viewers, that familiarity will not matter. Sometimes you press play on a movie like Apex because you want exactly this kind of thing. You want the chase, the wilderness, the physical struggle, the villain who turns the landscape into a trap. In that mood, originality may not be the main requirement. Execution is. And to be fair, Apex has enough execution to stay watchable. It moves, it looks good, it has moments of tension, it has actors with presence. It knows how to deliver a basic survival thriller rhythm, but watchable is not the same as memorable. That is the gap the film struggles to cross. It can hold your attention in the moment, but it rarely leaves anything behind. You are not left thinking about the psychology of the characters. You are not haunted by the moral weight of the hunt. You are not surprised by the shape of the story. You are mostly waiting for the film to confirm what you already suspected. And when a thriller becomes predictable, suspense turns into procedure. You stop asking, what is going to happen, and start asking, when is the movie going to reach the thing it already told me was coming? That is a dangerous place for a survival film because the genre depends on immediacy. It should feel desperate, unstable, and one wrong decision away from disaster. But too often, Apex feels controlled in the wrong way, not elegant, safe, calculated, familiar, afraid to break from the template. That is why the film feels so divisive. Some viewers will call it a solid, entertaining ride because the formula still works. Others will see the same formula and feel exhausted because they have seen too many versions of this story already. Same isolated setting, same hunter and prey structure, same emotional wound, same survival obstacles, same final push toward victory. It is not that Apex has no craft. It is that the craft is often used to polish a story that needed more invention. A stronger version could have pushed deeper into the psychology of the hunt. It could have made Sasha's grief more unpredictable. It could have made Ben's ritual more disturbing and specific. It could have created survival scenarios that felt less convenient and more terrifying. It could have taken one or two bold turns viewers genuinely did not expect. Instead, Apex mostly plays the hits, and that is the strange frustration of the movie. It is competent enough that you can see the better film hiding inside it. The setting is there. The physicality is there. The star power is there. The survival framework is there, but the originality is not strong enough to make the film rise above its influences. So yes, Apex is tense in places. Yes, it is easy to watch. Yes, it has enough movement and danger to satisfy viewers looking for a straightforward thriller. But when the credits roll, the strongest feeling is not shock, fear, or emotional release. It is recognition. You have been here before. There is a specific kind of survival thriller Netflix has been leaning into lately, and you can almost recognize it within the first few minutes. A woman is carrying grief. Something terrible happened in her past, or just before the main story begins. She is emotionally damaged, physically capable, and isolated from the normal world. Then the film traps her somewhere extreme, inside a shipping container, inside a forest, inside a remote landscape, or in this case, deep in the Australian wilderness. From there, the story becomes a test of endurance. That is exactly where Apex fits. Sasha is not simply thrown into danger. She is introduced as someone already carrying loss. The movie gives her grief before it gives her the hunt, and that has become a familiar streaming thriller pattern. The protagonist is not only fighting for survival, she is also fighting through trauma. The external danger becomes a physical expression of the emotional pain she carries. On paper, that can be powerful. A survival thriller becomes more interesting when the character's inner life connects to the danger around them. The wilderness can reflect grief. The chase can force someone to choose life again. Every climb, fall, and desperate escape can carry emotional meaning if the story builds that connection carefully. But in Apex, the grief often feels less like a deep emotional engine and more like a narrative tool. It explains why Sasha enters the wilderness. It explains why she is alone. It gives the film a heavier tone. But once the hunt begins, that emotional foundation gets pushed aside by survival mechanics. Run, hide, climb, swim, fight, repeat. The grief is present, but it does not transform the movie. It feels like part of the formula, not the heart of the story, and that is where the Netflix survival thriller structure starts to show. These films often follow a clean pattern. The lead character is already wounded. The environment becomes a trap. The villain or situation keeps applying pressure. The protagonist uses whatever tools are available. Every obstacle is brutal, but somehow survivable. By the end, after an impossible series of physical punishments, the heroine is the last person standing. That structure can be satisfying. It is simple, primal, and easy to watch. You understand the stakes immediately. You know what the character wants. You know what danger looks like. There is no complicated mythology, no massive cast, no overstuffed subplot. Just one person trying to stay alive as everything gets worse. But when too many films use the same emotional blueprint, the effect fades. Instead of raw, it starts to feel manufactured. Instead of personal, it feels assembled. The grieving woman, the isolated location, the sudden predator. The improvised survival tools, the impossible injuries, the final burst of strength. Once you recognize the pattern, it becomes harder to feel surprised by it. That is one of Apex's biggest issues. It is predictable not only because of its own writing, but because it belongs to a larger wave of movies that have trained viewers to expect these exact beats. By the time Sasha is alone in the wilderness, you can already sense the shape of the film. You know the obvious creeps are probably not the real threat. You know the charming stranger will become dangerous. You know the physical skills introduced early will return later. You know the emotional wound will justify the final act of survival. That does not make the movie bad, but it does make it overly familiar. And familiarity becomes a problem when the film does not add enough personality of its own. Apex has the right ingredients: star power, striking landscapes, physical danger, a villain with a twisted ritual, and a lead character built for endurance. Yet the structure around those ingredients feels too much like a streaming thriller checklist. Give the lead trauma, put her somewhere remote, make the environment beautiful but deadly, introduce a charming man who becomes a predator, force her through escalating physical trials, end with survival as emotional rebirth. Again, that formula can work. It has worked before, but it needs freshness. It needs sharper psychology, stranger choices, stronger character writing, or a more unpredictable threat. Without that, the film becomes less of an experience and more of a product, polished, efficient, easy to consume, but easy to forget. That is the strange thing about Apex. It has the shape of a gripping survival thriller. It has the look of one. It even has moments where the tension clicks and the formula does exactly what it should. You feel the chase. You feel the isolation. You feel the wilderness closing in around Sasha, but you also feel the template. You feel the movie following a route already marked by other streaming survival stories. And once that happens, the danger loses some of its bite. The film wants to feel primal, but the structure feels calculated. It wants to feel like a nightmare, but too often it feels like a familiar arrangement of genre pieces. This is why some viewers will still enjoy it, because formula is not automatically failure. Sometimes the comfort of a familiar structure is part of the appeal. If you want a clean, tense, physical survival thriller, Apex gives you that. It does not ask much from the audience, and for some viewers, that makes it an ideal streaming watch. But if you want a movie that breaks out of the Netflix survival mold, Apex never quite gets there. It follows the pattern too closely. It uses grief as setup, isolation as pressure, physical endurance as spectacle, and survival as the final statement. It works well enough in the moment, but it is too recognizable to feel truly dangerous. That may be the clearest way to understand the film. Apex is not just a survival thriller. It is a Netflix survival thriller, polished, accessible, intense in bursts, emotionally simplified, and built around a formula that works just well enough to keep you watching, even when you can see every step ahead. The screenplay is where the film's biggest contradiction lies. On the surface, this story has everything it needs: a strong lead character, a remote wilderness setting, a dangerous stranger, a traumatic opening, and a chase built around cliffs, rivers, traps, and survival instinct. These are clean thriller ingredients, and the film knows how to arrange them in a way that keeps the momentum alive. But arrangement is not depth. The script understands the shape of a survival thriller, but it does not always know how to make that shape feel urgent, fresh, or emotionally dangerous. It gives us the pieces, the setup, the pursuit, the moments where Sasha has to push through pain and exhaustion, but too often the writing moves from one expected beat to the next instead of discovering something unpredictable inside the story. That is why Apex can be entertaining and underwhelming at the same time. The screenplay is functional. It is not broken. It does not collapse under its own logic every 5 minutes. It keeps the story moving, keeps the conflict clear, and gives the actors enough material to hold the screen. In a basic streaming thriller sense, it does its job. You know who is being hunted. You know who is hunting her. You know the goal. Survive, but the script rarely pushes beyond that. There is a thinness to the writing that becomes more noticeable as the film goes on. Sasha's emotional state is introduced, but not explored with enough complexity. Ben's twisted game gives the film danger, but his psychology does not always feel specific enough to be truly disturbing. The wilderness is dangerous, but the situations sometimes feel designed for convenience rather than organic survival pressure. And when a thriller feels convenient, tension starts to leak out. A great survival story makes every obstacle feel unavoidable. The character is trapped by the land, the weather, the enemy, the body, and the limits of preparation. Every choice creates consequences. Every mistake matters. Every lucky escape still feels earned because the danger has been built honestly. In Apex, some moments do work that way. When the film focuses on physical endurance, climbing, rushing water, or the sheer isolation of the terrain, it creates real pressure. You feel the body struggling against the environment. You feel the appeal of the concept. There are flashes where the execution rises above the writing, where movement and location briefly carry the suspense. But then the screenplay pulls everything back into familiar territory. The chase becomes another chase. The escape becomes another escape. The villain appears where he needs to appear. The survival challenge lands exactly when the story requires one. Instead of building a truly escalating nightmare, the film sometimes feels like it is checking off thriller requirements. That is the difference between momentum and intensity. Apex often has momentum. It moves forward, gives the audience something to watch, and rarely sits still for too long. But intensity requires more than movement. It comes from uncertainty, character investment, and danger that feels specific and personal. That is where the screenplay struggles. The film wants Sasha's journey to feel like more than physical survival, but the writing does not consistently give her the emotional architecture to support that. Her grief matters to the premise, yet once the hunt begins, it fades behind the mechanics of action. Her skills matter to the survival story, but the script often uses them in predictable ways. Her struggle is visually clear, but emotionally it could have cut deeper. The same problem applies to Ben. He is a strong villain concept, charming, unstable, ritualistic, and dangerous. He should feel like a psychological trap as much as a physical one, but the screenplay does not always give him enough layers. His presence works because of performance and situation, not because the writing keeps revealing new dimensions. He is threatening, he is strange, but the film could have made his game feel more precise, more personal, and more haunting. Instead, it often chooses efficiency over complexity. That makes Apex easy to watch but harder to remember. Some viewers will not mind that at all. For them, the script delivers enough: a clear threat, a capable protagonist, a dangerous landscape, and a steady line of suspense. Not every thriller needs psychological density. Sometimes the pleasure is in the simplicity. Sometimes a survival movie only needs to put a character in danger and keep tightening the rope. And to be fair, Apex has moments where that simple approach works. It can be gripping. It can be slick. It can make the wilderness feel cinematic. It can create the feeling of a controlled, focused thriller that knows exactly what lane it wants to drive in. But the stronger the production looks, the more the writing limitations stand out. The cinematography suggests something grander. The star power suggests something richer. The physical action suggests something more visceral, yet the screenplay keeps returning to broad strokes. It avoids the messier, stranger, more uncomfortable possibilities that could have made the film genuinely distinctive. That is why the story execution feels uneven. At its best, Apex is a lean, entertaining survival thriller with enough craft to hold attention. At its weakest, it feels like a polished outline of a better movie. The setup is there, but the emotional payoff is limited. The danger is there, but the surprise is limited. The villain is there, but the psychology is limited. The wilderness is there, but the survival logic is sometimes too convenient. The result is a film that works better moment to moment than as a complete experience. You can enjoy individual scenes. You can appreciate the physicality. You can admire the scenery. You can be pulled along by the chase. But when you step back and look at the screenplay as a whole, it becomes clear that Apex is not lacking ingredients. It is lacking invention. The story is sturdy enough to carry the movie across the finish line, but not sharp enough to make that finish feel powerful. It delivers a ride, but not a revelation. It creates suspense, but not enough consequence. It gives us survival, but not enough soul. That is the central weakness of the screenplay. Apex knows how to move. It just does not always know how to matter. The emotional foundation of Apex is grief. That is where the film begins. Before Sasha becomes prey, before the wilderness becomes a trap, before Ben turns the landscape into a hunting ground, the movie introduces her as someone carrying loss. She is not going into the wild for adventure alone. She is going there with emotional weight behind her. In theory, that is exactly the right choice. A survival thriller becomes much stronger when the danger outside the character connects to something broken inside them. The wilderness can become a mirror. the hunt can become more than a physical escape. Every injury, climb, and moment of exhaustion can become part of a larger emotional journey. A character fighting to survive can also be fighting to reclaim the part of themselves grief has damaged. That is the version of Apex that feels possible. Sasha loses Tommy, and that loss sends her to Australia. The trip is not random. It is tied to him, to memory, to mourning, and to the need to face something alone. She is already a climber, already someone who understands risk, but grief changes the meaning of risk. What used to be thrill-seeking now carries a darker shadow. Is she testing herself, punishing herself, running from the pain, trying to feel close to someone she lost? These are the questions the film could have used to deepen her. But Apex does not spend enough time inside those questions. Sasha's grief is present, but not fully explored. It gives the film its opening wound. It gives her a reason to leave. It gives the story a serious emotional tone. But once the hunt begins, grief starts to feel less like the soul of the movie and more like a device that pushes the plot forward. That is where the character writing becomes thin. The film tells us Sasha is in pain, but it does not always make that pain feel specific. It shows us the tragedy, but does not build enough emotional detail around what Tommy meant to her beyond his immediate function in the story. His death matters because it gets Sasha to the next phase of the movie, but the relationship itself does not linger with enough weight to shape everything that follows. And that matters, because survival thrillers need more than survival. If all we know is that the character wants to live, the story can still work on a basic level. Survival is primal. It is easy to understand. But if we also know what the character is living with, what they are afraid to face, what memory haunts them, and what guilt or regret drives them, every escape becomes stronger. Every moment of endurance carries emotional weight. With Sasha, the film only goes part of the way. She is physically defined far more clearly than emotionally. We understand that she is tough. She can climb. She handles pressure. She can endure pain, rapids, terrain, and pursuit. But her inner life is less developed. The movie gives us the outline of trauma without filling in the texture. That is why some emotional beats do not land as hard as they should. The film wants Sasha's survival to feel like transformation, but transformation needs depth at the starting point. We need to feel the difference between who she was before the hunt and who she becomes after it. We need grief to shape her choices, not just explain her location. We need the wilderness to force emotional confrontation, not only physical escape. Instead, Apex often treats grief as setup. It is why she is alone, why she travels, and why the movie can frame her ordeal as more than random violence. But after that, the screenplay becomes far more interested in movement than reflection. The chase takes over, and Sasha's emotional wound becomes background noise behind the mechanics of the thriller. That does not ruin the movie, but it limits it. Charlize Theron is playing a character who should have layers. An adrenaline seeker, a grieving friend, a survivor, a woman used to choosing danger who suddenly has danger chosen for her. That is a strong psychological contrast. Sasha's identity could have been built around control. She controls the climb. She controls the risk. She controls how close she gets to death. Then Ben takes that control away. That should be the emotional core of the film. Not just can Sasha survive, but what happens when someone who lives by controlled danger is thrown into uncontrolled terror? That idea is buried inside the premise, but the script does not dig deep enough. The same thinness affects the side characters. Tommy's presence matters, but it is brief. Eric Bana brings familiarity and weight just by appearing, yet the role does not have enough space to become more than a catalyst. He exists mainly to create the loss that sends Sasha into the wilderness. Once that function is complete, the film moves on. Ben is also shaped more by concept than complexity. He is the charming threat, the predator, the man who turns survival into ritual. That works on the thriller's surface, but stronger writing could have made his obsession far more disturbing. His game could have revealed more about Sasha, more about him, and more about the dynamic between hunter and hunted. Instead, the characters often feel like pieces inside a survival machine. Sasha is the survivor. Ben is the hunter. Tommy is the loss. The locals are obstacles or misdirection. The emotional architecture is simple, maybe too simple, for a film that wants to feel intense and psychological. And that simplicity is what separates a solid thriller from a memorable one. A solid thriller keeps you watching with danger. A memorable thriller makes you care why the danger matters. It turns the body into a battlefield and the mind into another one. It makes every wound connect to something deeper than pain. It makes survival feel like revelation. Apex gets close to that idea, but does not fully earn it. There are moments where Sasha's physical fight hints at an emotional one. Her struggle through the wilderness suggests someone being forced to choose life after loss. Her endurance carries the shape of a character trying not to be consumed by what happened before. But the film rarely slows down enough to let those ideas breathe. Because of that, the grief remains useful rather than profound. It gives the movie a serious starting point. It gives Sasha a reason to enter the story. It gives the survival journey an implied emotional charge, but it never becomes the powerful inner engine it could have been. That is the frustration. The film has a character who should be emotionally fascinating, but the writing keeps her mostly on the surface. It has a tragedy that should echo through every scene, but often functions like a doorway into the action. It has a wilderness that could have become a psychological landscape, but mostly remains a physical arena. So when Apex works, it works as a chase. When it falls short as a character study. Sasha survives the wilderness, but the film never fully explores the person underneath the survival. That is why the emotional side of Apex feels thinner than the physical one. The body is tested, the landscape is hostile, the danger is clear, but the grief, the thing meant to give the story its heart, never quite reaches the summit. Charlize Theron is the face of Apex, and the whole film depends on whether you believe Sasha as both an action heroine and a wounded survivor. Physically, Theron gives the movie real credibility. Sasha is not written as fragile, confused, or helpless. She is an experienced climber, an adrenaline seeker, a woman already comfortable with danger before danger turns against her. That means the performance needs toughness from the start, and Theron understands that. She brings a hard physical presence to the role, the kind that makes it believable when Sasha is climbing, fighting, running, pushing through pain, and refusing to collapse as the wilderness closes in. That is where the casting makes immediate sense. Theron has always had that screen quality where she can look exhausted, wounded, and still dangerous. Apex leans heavily on that. The film asks her to carry long stretches through movement rather than dialogue. She has to sell the strain of the climb, the shock of betrayal, the desperation of pursuit, and the brutal cost of survival. Even when the script is thin, her body language often does the work the writing does not. You feel the effort. You feel the sweat, the terrain, the pressure, and the weight of someone who has to keep moving because stopping means death. The climbing scenes, the rapids, and the rugged landscape all benefit from the fact that Theron never feels decorative in the role. She feels active, present, embedded in the environment. She gives Sasha the toughness needed for the survival thriller engine to work. For many viewers, that will be enough. They came to see Charlize Theron thrown into a brutal wilderness chase, and the movie gives them that. She looks committed. She looks capable. She brings star power without softening the action. There is a reason some reactions focus so heavily on her physicality. It is one of the film's clearest strengths. Even when the story feels familiar, watching Theron endure the ordeal gives Apex a certain force. But this is also where the performance becomes divisive. While Theron's physical commitment is strong, the emotional side of Sasha does not land for everyone. Some viewers will see her as fierce, natural, and commanding. Others may find the performance too controlled, too neutral, almost too restrained for a character being hunted, injured, and psychologically pushed to the edge. That criticism matters because Sasha is not just supposed to be a body surviving danger. She is supposed to be a person carrying grief. The film opens with loss, sends her into the wilderness because of that loss, and then uses the hunt as a test of whether she can keep fighting. For that journey to fully work, we need to feel the emotional fracture beneath the physical endurance. At times, Theron gives us the strength more clearly than the fracture. Sasha's face can feel locked into one mode. Focused, hardened, controlled. That can work in certain scenes. She is an experienced adventurer, someone trained to stay calm under pressure. But when that control stays too consistent, it flattens the emotional temperature of the movie. Fear, pain, urgency, grief, panic. These emotions need to rise and fall. They need to break through the toughness. For some viewers, they do not break through enough. That becomes especially noticeable beside Taron Egerton's more expressive villain performance. Ben is volatile, strange, performative, and unpredictable. He gives the movie bursts of energy. He reacts. He shifts. He seems to enjoy the game he has created. So when Sasha remains emotionally contained for too long, the balance can tilt in an unexpected direction. The villain starts to feel like the more alive presence on screen. That is dangerous for a survival thriller. The audience should never lose emotional connection with the person being hunted. We can be fascinated by the predator, but we have to stay locked into the survivor. We need to feel her terror, rage, desperation, and will to live. Theron gives us the will. She gives us the toughness. She gives us the endurance. But the script and performance together do not always give us the vulnerability that would make Sasha unforgettable. Still, it would be unfair to place all of that on Theron. A performance can only go so far when the character writing is limited. Sasha's grief is not deeply explored. Her relationship with Tommy is brief. Her inner life is suggested more than developed. Much of Sasha's role becomes physical reaction. Escape this, survive that, climb here, fight there. Theron is carrying a character designed more clearly as a survival figure than a fully textured human being. And within those limits, she does a lot. She makes Sasha believable as someone who would not fold under pressure. She gives the film its action credibility. She brings enough star authority to make the movie feel bigger than its basic premise. Without her, Apex would feel smaller, more disposable, and far less polished. But that same star power also creates expectations. When you cast Charlize Theron, viewers expect more than competence. They expect emotional fire, layers, and a role that allows her to be more than tough. Apex does not always give her enough material to reach that level. It lets her climb, run, suffer, and fight, but rarely lets Sasha become psychologically complex. That is the split. As an action presence, Theron works. As a physical survivor, she works. As the visual anchor of the film, she works. She gives Apex a strong center and helps sell the harshness of the wilderness. But as an emotional lead, the performance is more uneven. Not because there is no effort, but because the role often mistakes endurance for depth. Sasha is constantly tested by the environment, but not always revealed by it. We see what she can survive, but we do not always feel who she is becoming. And that is the frustration of Charlize Theron in Apex. She is one of the biggest reasons the movie is watchable. Her physical commitment gives it weight, her presence gives it scale, and her toughness fits the survival thriller framework beautifully. But the movie needed to let her bleed emotionally as much as physically. Sasha should not only feel strong enough to survive the hunt, she should feel like someone whose soul is being dragged through it. If Charlize Theron gives Apex its physical anchor, Taron Egerton gives the film its unstable pulse. Ben is the character who turns the movie from wilderness drama into survival nightmare. At first, he enters with charm. He does not immediately announce himself as the monster, and that matters. In a film like this, the villain has to be believable before he becomes dangerous. He has to feel like someone Sasha might speak to, briefly trust, or at least underestimate. Egerton understands that game. He does not play Ben as pure brutality from the first second. He lets him appear controlled, friendly enough, maybe strange around the edges, but not instantly obvious as the real threat. That is where the performance finds its first layer of danger. Ben is not frightening because he looks like a villain the moment he arrives. He is frightening because he knows how not to look like one. That false charm makes the shift work. Once the mask drops, Ben becomes the engine of the film. He is not just chasing Sasha, he is performing the hunt. He treats the wilderness like a stage and Sasha like part of a ritual already built inside his head. There is something theatrical about him, something twisted and self-aware. He wants control, he wants fear. He wants the game to mean something, even if that meaning only exists inside his own disturbed logic. Egerton leans into that instability. His performance brings energy to a film that sometimes risks becoming too controlled. When Ben is on screen, the temperature changes. He can be unsettling, strange, amused, cruel, and oddly charismatic. He gives the story a sense of unpredictability the screenplay itself does not always provide. Even when the plot follows familiar lines, Egerton keeps Ben alive in the moment. That is why many viewers may come away seeing him as the standout. He gives the movie flavor. He gives it threat. He gives it the uncomfortable spark a thriller villain needs. Ben is not the most deeply written antagonist, but Egerton plays him with enough force that you feel the potential of the character. He makes you watch him. He makes you wonder what expression will cross his face next, what line he will deliver, what strange turn his mood might take. And in a survival thriller, that matters. The hunter cannot simply be a body moving through the woods. He has to become pressure. He has to feel like an idea invading the protagonist's space. Ben's presence changes the landscape. Before him, the wilderness is dangerous because it is remote, rugged, and unpredictable. After him, the wilderness becomes intentional. The trees, rivers, cliffs, and isolation all start to feel like part of his trap. That is the strongest thing Egerton brings to the role, the sense that Ben enjoys controlling the rules. He is not improvising in panic. He is not simply reacting. He feels like someone who has imagined this, prepared for it, and now takes pleasure in watching another person suffer inside his design. That makes him more than a random psycho in the woods. It makes him the twisted author of Sasha's ordeal. But the performance also exposes one of the film's weaknesses. Egerton is doing more than the writing gives him. Ben is a strong villain concept, but the screenplay does not always deepen him beyond that concept. He has menace, but not enough mystery. He has behavior, but not enough psychology. He has a ritual, but the film never fully explores what that ritual reveals about him, or why this hunt matters beyond surface-level madness. So the result is strange. Egerton makes Ben compelling, but the character still feels limited. you can feel the actor pushing for more texture. He adds expression, rhythm, volatility. He makes Ben entertaining in a dark, uncomfortable way. But the script keeps him inside a familiar lane, the charming stranger who becomes the sadistic hunter. That works, but it could have been sharper, more disturbing, and more personal. The best villains in survival thrillers do not just threaten the hero physically. They reveal something about them. They force the protagonist into moral, psychological, or emotional confrontation. Ben should be the perfect opposite of Sasha. She chooses danger as adventure. He turns danger into domination. She climbs to test herself. He hunts to control someone else. There is a fascinating contrast there, but Apex only partially uses it. Instead of fully developing that mirror, the film often relies on Ben as an external threat. He pushes the chase forward, creates obstacles, raises the stakes, and brings intensity. But he does not always become the kind of haunting antagonist who lingers after the movie ends. And yet, despite that, Egerton nearly carries the villain side of the film through performance alone. He gives Ben enough personality to stand out in a story that often feels familiar. He understands that a character like this cannot be played as one constant note of aggression. If the villain is always loud, cruel, and obvious, the audience adjusts. The danger goes flat. Egerton avoids that by shifting tone. Sometimes Ben is charming, sometimes he is cold. Sometimes he seems almost amused by the nightmare he has created. That variation makes him watchable. It also creates an unexpected imbalance. At times, Ben feels more animated than Sasha. He has more emotional movement, more unpredictability, more screen energy. That does not mean the audience is supposed to root for him, and the movie clearly does not intend that. But it does mean Egerton becomes the performer who most actively changes the air around him. In a film built around hunter and hunted, that imbalance is impossible to ignore. Apex needs Ben to be frightening, but it also needs Sasha to remain emotionally central. When Ben becomes the most interesting presence in the room, the film gains energy but loses some moral alignment. The villain becomes fascinating while the heroine risks feeling underwritten. That is not Egerton's fault. In fact, it is partly a compliment to how much he brings to the role. Still, not every reaction to his performance will be glowing. Some viewers may feel his menace remains too surface level. Some may think the character resembles other unstable psycho-thriller roles without enough freshness. Others may find the accent or the broadness of the villain distracting. And those criticisms are fair, because the performance occasionally leans into familiar territory. It is intense but not always subtle, entertaining but not always original. But for a movie like Apex, he gives it exactly the spark it needs. Without Ben, the film would be a visually polished survival story on a familiar path. With Ben, it has a wild card, a threat that smiles before it strikes. A villain who turns the landscape into a game. A man whose charm is not warmth but camouflage. That is why Taron Egerton matters so much here. He may not have the richest villain writing, but he understands the assignment better than almost anyone in the movie. He makes Ben dangerous enough to keep the chase alive, strange enough to hold attention, and theatrical enough to separate him from a generic wilderness attacker. The writing may keep Ben from becoming unforgettable, but Egerton makes sure he is never boring. Eric Bana's role in Apex is one of those casting choices that immediately raises expectations. The moment you see his name attached to a film like this, you assume he is going to matter. Bana is not the kind of actor you casually place into a story without purpose. He brings weight, recognition, and instant presence. He brings a grounded presence that can make a scene feel instantly lived in. And because Apex is tied to Australia, his casting carries an extra layer of promise. Bana could have helped anchor the film in place. He could have brought local texture, made the Australian side of the story feel more authentic, and served as more than a familiar face. He could have been an emotional or cultural bridge between Sasha, the wilderness, and the journey ahead, but that is not what happens. Bana plays Tommy, Sasha's climbing partner, and his function is clear. He exists to create the emotional wound that sends Sasha forward. He belongs to the prologue. He gives the opening tragedy recognizable weight. His death becomes the catalyst for Sasha's trip to Australia, and once that purpose is fulfilled, the film moves on. That is the issue. Tommy is important to the plot, but he is not given enough space to become important to us. Structurally, we understand that his loss matters. We understand Sasha is grieving him. We understand his connection to Australia is part of what pulls her into the wilderness. But the relationship itself does not get enough room to breathe. We do not spend enough time with them to fully feel the history, affection, tension, or damage his death leaves behind. That makes Bana's presence feel strangely limited. He appears, lends the opening credibility, and disappears before the film has truly used what he can offer. The performance is not the problem. The role is simply small in a way that feels almost confusing. Viewers are left asking the obvious question, why bring in Eric Bana for something this brief? That question matters because casting creates a promise. When a recognizable actor appears early in a thriller, the audience starts making assumptions. Maybe this character will return in a meaningful way. Maybe his death will echo through the story. Maybe his relationship with Sasha will become the emotional spine of the film. Maybe there is more to him than the setup suggests. But Apex does not build on that promise. Tommy becomes less of a character and more of a narrative device. He is the loss, the reason, the emotional trigger. Once the movie uses him to push Sasha into isolation, it does not give him enough lingering presence to justify the emotional weight it wants us to feel. That is where the underuse becomes frustrating. Bana could have added something the film badly needed: depth. A stronger opening relationship could have made Sasha's grief more specific. It could have made her trip to Australia feel less like a plot requirement and more like a personal pilgrimage. It could have made every later moment of survival feel tied to someone we actually understood, not just someone briefly introduced so the film could hurt the protagonist. Imagine if Apex had taken more time with Sasha and Tommy, not a huge subplot, not a different movie, just enough detail to make their connection feel lived in, a few sharper exchanges, a clearer sense of history, a hint of unresolved regret, one moment that tells us why losing him breaks something inside her. Then, when Sasha enters the wilderness, Tommy would not just be the man who died in the prologue, he would become a ghost inside the story. That is what Apex is missing. The film wants grief to power the journey, but it does not fully build the relationship that creates the grief. And because Bana is the actor attached to that relationship, his underuse becomes even more noticeable. He has the presence to make Tommy memorable, but the screenplay gives him too little to work with. It also connects to a larger issue with the film's star power. Apex has big names: Charlize Theron, Taron Egerton, Eric Bana. That cast suggests a thriller with character weight, emotional complexity, and strong dramatic interplay. But the film often uses those names more as selling points than fully developed dramatic assets. Theron gets the physical showcase. Egerton gets the villain energy. Bana gets the brief emotional catalyst. For an actor of his caliber, that feels like a missed opportunity. Tommy could have been more than a tragic opening beat. He could have represented the life Sasha was losing control of. He could have been the emotional contrast to Ben, one man tied to care, history, and memory, the other tied to control, violence, and ritual. That contrast could have strengthened the whole film. Instead, Tommy fades too quickly. The result is one of the movie's clearest examples of unused potential. Bana brings enough recognition to make us pay attention, but the film does not reward that attention with substance. He is present just long enough for us to wonder why he is not present longer. And that is a strange feeling, because Apex does not need Tommy to dominate the story. This is Sasha's survival nightmare. It makes sense that the film isolates her. It makes sense that the hunt becomes the focus. But emotional isolation works best when we deeply feel what has been lost. The more real Tommy feels, the more haunted Sasha becomes. The more haunted Sasha becomes, the more powerful the survival story becomes. By not investing enough in Tommy, the film weakens its own emotional foundation. So Eric Bana's role is not a disaster. It is not a performance problem. It is a screenplay problem. He does what he can with limited time, but the film treats him like a plot function instead of a dramatic presence. In a movie already criticized for thin character development, that choice stands out. Bana should have been more than a familiar face in the opening. He should have been the emotional echo following Sasha through the wilderness. Instead, he becomes a reminder of what Apex keeps doing. Introducing strong ingredients, then not using them to full power. The strongest version of Apex is the one that becomes a pure cat-and-mouse thriller. That is where the film finds its pulse. Once Sasha realizes Ben is not the charming stranger he first appeared to be, the movie shifts into a much more primal mode. The emotional setup, the grief, the character backstory, all of it falls behind one immediate question. Can she stay alive long enough to outthink the man hunting her? That is the kind of simple pressure a survival thriller needs. There is something instantly cinematic about a chase in the wilderness. A city gives you options. A house gives you walls. A road gives you direction, but the wilderness gives you uncertainty. Every path could lead deeper into danger. Every hiding place could become a trap. Every sound matters because you cannot tell whether it is nature around you or the predator getting closer. Apex understands that basic fear. When the film locks into Sasha's isolation, it becomes much more effective. She is cut off from help, surrounded by terrain that is beautiful but unforgiving, and pursued by someone who knows how to turn that terrain against her. The threat is not only Ben, it is Ben plus the landscape, Ben plus the river, Ben plus the cliffs, Ben plus the distance from civilization. That combination gives the chase its best moments. The movie becomes about pressure, movement, exhaustion, and instinct. Sasha has to make decisions fast, and the film works best when we feel how little time she has to think. She is not solving a mystery from a safe distance. She is reacting while injured, frightened, tired, and exposed. One wrong move can mean being caught. One wrong step can mean falling. One wrong choice can send her straight into another part of Ben's game. That is where the suspense can be genuinely engaging. The cat-and-mouse structure gives Apex a clean engine. Ben pushes, Sasha escapes, Ben adjusts, Sasha improvises. The wilderness keeps changing the shape of the chase. Sometimes the danger is physical. Sometimes it is psychological. Sometimes it is the simple terror of realizing the person after you may already know where you are going before you do. And when that rhythm works, the movie becomes easy to watch. This is the part of Apex many viewers will respond to most strongly. It has that edge-of-the-seat quality, especially for audiences who enjoy survival thrillers where the pleasure comes from the chase itself. You are not necessarily watching for deep character study. You are watching for pursuit, close calls, the feeling of being trapped in open space, and the tension of someone surviving with only instinct and whatever the environment provides. The film also benefits from the fact that Sasha is not helpless. That makes the chase more dynamic. If she were completely unprepared, the story would become one-sided too quickly. But Sasha has physical skill. She can climb. She can endure. She understands risk. That gives her enough credibility to fight back, adapt, and keep the tension alive. The question is not whether she has any chance at all. The question is whether her skill set is enough when the danger is no longer voluntary. That is a strong survival thriller idea. Sasha chooses danger in her normal life. She seeks it. She climbs into it. She builds her identity around it. But Ben turns danger into something else. He removes the choice. He makes the wilderness hostile on purpose, and that shift gives the chase more meaning than a simple run through the woods. Sasha is forced to confront danger without control. Still, the suspense does not work equally well for everyone. Some viewers will find the movie tense from start to finish. Others may feel the tension never fully ignites. That split reaction makes sense, because Apex often gets the atmosphere right while struggling with the mechanics. The pressure is there. The landscape is there. The villain is there. But the film sometimes lets convenience weaken the danger. Ben appears too easily. Sasha survives too neatly. The chase can feel staged instead of chaotic. Obstacles arrive because the screenplay needs them, not always because the environment naturally creates them. That matters. A cat-and-mouse thriller depends on trust. The audience has to believe both characters are making choices inside a real situation. The hunter should feel clever, not magically informed. The survivor should feel resourceful, not protected by the script. When a villain keeps finding the protagonist without a believable reason, suspense turns into frustration. When escapes feel too arranged, danger starts to feel less dangerous. Apex occasionally falls into that trap. It wants us to feel trapped inside a brutal survival scenario, but the logic can feel too clean. The chase is exciting in concept, but not always raw enough in execution. It gives us pursuit, but not enough unpredictability. It gives us danger, but not enough consequence. That is why the suspense works in bursts rather than as a constant grip. At its best, Apex makes you feel the panic of being hunted through terrain with no mercy. The river scenes, climbing sequences, and moments of physical exhaustion are where the film tightens. You feel Sasha's body being tested. You feel the scale of the environment. You feel the basic fear of not knowing how far away Ben is. At its weakest, the film moves through pre-planned survival stations. Run here, hide there, climb this. Escape that, repeat. The structure keeps the movie moving, but repetition can dull suspense. If every sequence becomes another version of the same chase beat, the danger starts to flatten. A survival thriller needs escalation. Each stage should feel worse than the last, not just like different scenery wrapped around the same rhythm. That is the challenge Apex faces. It has enough tension to stay engaging, but not always enough variation to surprise. It has enough pressure to remain watchable, but not enough brutality or unpredictability to become unforgettable. It feels like a thriller that knows how to chase, but not always how to shock. And yet the cat-and-mouse element remains one of the film's clearest strengths. Even when the writing is familiar, the primal appeal still works. A person being hunted is one of the oldest thriller engines for a reason. It is immediate, physical, easy to understand. The stakes are instant. Keep moving, stay hidden, find a way out, survive the next minute. Apex taps into that. It may not perfect it. It may not reinvent it. But when the movie strips itself down to Sasha against Ben, body against terrain, instinct against control, it becomes the film it clearly wants to be. a tense wilderness chase where every breath feels borrowed and every escape feels temporary. That is the power of the cat-and-mouse structure here. It keeps Apex alive even when the story feels familiar. It gives the film movement when the characters feel thin. It gives the audience something immediate to hold on to. And it reminds us that sometimes a thriller does not need a complicated hook to work. Sometimes all it needs is someone running for their life and someone else who refuses to stop following. Pacing is one of the more interesting conversations around Apex because the film creates two very different viewing experiences. For some viewers, it moves exactly the way a survival thriller should: quick, direct, constantly pushing forward. Once the danger begins, there is very little wasted space. Sasha is thrown from one physical threat into another. The chase keeps moving, the wilderness keeps changing, Ben keeps applying pressure, and the story keeps tightening around one question: how much longer can she survive? That version of Apex feels like a fast ride. It does not overcomplicate itself. It does not pause every few minutes to explain the villain's psychology or bury the audience under unnecessary subplots. It gives you a clean setup, a dangerous environment, and a pursuit that keeps escalating. For viewers who want a straightforward thriller, that can be enough. This also connects to Eric Bana's underuse. Tommy is not a local side character in the same way, but his brief presence reflects a larger pattern. Apex introduces people who could add emotional or cultural weight, then moves past them quickly. The film is so focused on pushing Sasha into the hunt that it never fully invests in the human world around her. Everyone becomes part of the machine, driving her toward danger. That can work in a lean thriller, but it limits the film's personality. The best survival movies understand that the world before the hunt matters. The people around the protagonist matter. The warnings, conversations, atmosphere, local customs, and odd details all create the feeling that the story is taking place somewhere specific. Without that, the hunt may still be tense, but it feels less rooted. Apex often feels less rooted than it should. It gives us a striking environment, but not enough believable community around it. It gives us suspicious figures, but not enough nuance. It gives us local color, but sometimes that color feels painted on rather than lived in. For casual viewers, this may not be a major issue. They may not care if the side characters are thin as long as the chase is exciting. And to be fair, once the survival thriller fully begins, the movie is no longer asking those characters to carry much weight. The focus narrows, and the film becomes Sasha versus Ben. But for viewers paying attention to world building and authenticity, the weakness remains. Side characters are not just filler. They are part of the film's credibility. They help determine whether the setting feels like a real place or a genre playground. In Apex, too many feel closer to the second option. That is why the local stereotypes stand out. They are not the movie's biggest flaw, but they reinforce several of its other problems. Predictability, shallow writing, weak authenticity, and a tendency to use familiar thriller shortcuts instead of sharper observation. The film wants the Australian wilderness to feel dangerous. But that danger would have felt stronger if the people around the wilderness felt more real. Instead, Apex gives us side characters who often feel designed to make us suspicious for a few minutes before the main plot takes over. They add mood but not much meaning. They create unease but not much authenticity. They fill the edges of the frame but rarely deepen the world. And in a movie already struggling to rise above familiar genre patterns, that is another missed chance to make the story feel alive. There is an interesting question underneath Apex. Is this simply strong streaming content, or did it have the energy to work in theaters? On one level, Apex feels completely designed for Netflix. It is compact, direct, easy to understand, and built around a clean survival thriller hook. You do not need a massive explanation to sell it. Charlize Theron enters the wilderness. Taron Egerton turns dangerous. The landscape becomes a trap. The chase begins. That is a very clickable premise, and for streaming, that matters. Apex is the kind of film that can grab attention through a thumbnail, a cast list, and a short description. It has recognizable stars, a simple danger-driven concept, and enough action to promise a fast, tense night of entertainment. You can easily imagine someone scrolling through Netflix, seeing the names, reading the setup, and thinking, all right, this looks worth a watch. In that sense, Apex works as subscription-worthy content. It does not demand too much from the viewer. It does not require theatrical commitment. It does not ask you to follow complicated mythology or invest in a long franchise. It gives you a contained story, a recognizable genre, and a 90-minute survival ride. For many viewers, that is exactly what streaming thrillers are supposed to do. You press play. You get tension, scenery, a villain, and a physical fight for survival. Then you move on. That is both the strength and limitation of Apex. The same qualities that make it easy to stream also make it feel less essential. It is polished enough to satisfy a casual viewer, but not bold enough to demand a theatrical experience. It looks good, but the story is familiar. It has star power, but thin characters. It has action, but not enough originality. It has tension, but not enough lasting impact. So the film sits in that modern middle space, too well made to dismiss as throwaway content, but too conventional to feel like a major cinematic event. That is where the theatrical question becomes interesting. With the right marketing, Apex could have had some theatrical appeal. The Australian wilderness, rapids, cliffs, and wide landscapes naturally benefit from a bigger screen. Survival thrillers can be powerful in theaters because the environment surrounds you. The height feels higher, the water feels louder, the isolation feels larger. A film like this could have gained intensity from scale. The visuals are one of its strongest assets, and theatrical presentation might have amplified them. The river sequences especially could have played well with theatrical sound and size. Rapids are not just something you watch. In the right environment, you feel them. The roar of water, the chaos of movement, the pressure of being dragged into something uncontrollable. All of that becomes more immersive when the screen and sound system are working at full force. The climbing scenes could have benefited from that scale too. Height is one of the most immediate forms of cinematic tension. A cliff face on television can still work, but a cliff face in a theater can make the body react. You feel the drop more, the exposure more, the vulnerability of a person hanging in open space. That kind of physical suspense can translate beautifully to a theatrical setting. And then there is the cast. Charlize Theron and Taron Egerton are not small names. Their presence gives the film visibility and audience curiosity. Theron's action credibility alone could have been a selling point. Egerton playing against type as a darker, more unstable figure could have added another layer of marketing appeal. On paper, there is enough here for a theatrical thriller campaign. Big star, remote wilderness, psychological hunt, brutal survival. But theatrical potential is not the same as theatrical necessity. A film needs more than landscapes and recognizable actors to feel essential on the big screen. It needs urgency, distinction, the sense that this experience will be stronger, richer, or more memorable when shared with an audience. Apex has pieces of that, but not enough. Its story is too familiar to feel like an event. That is why streaming may actually be its natural home. The movie is easier to appreciate when expectations are lower. As a Netflix discovery, it can feel like a pleasant surprise. A polished survival thriller with strong scenery and enough tension to justify the time. As a theatrical release, the weaknesses might feel bigger. The predictability might be harder to forgive. The thin character writing might stand out more. The authenticity issues might feel more frustrating. Streaming changes the standard. At home, a film like Apex does not need to become unforgettable to feel worthwhile. It only needs to be engaging enough to hold attention. It needs to be better than the next thing in the queue. It needs to deliver a solid experience without making you regret pressing play. And for many viewers, Apex clears that bar. That is why some will call it a strong streaming release. It has the professionalism viewers expect from a major platform film. It looks expensive enough. It moves fast enough. It has familiar faces. It delivers tension, action, and a straightforward survival hook. It is the kind of movie that can satisfy someone looking for undemanding entertainment after a long week. But the danger of that label is that it can also become a ceiling. Good for streaming sometimes means not good enough to matter, and Apex occasionally falls into that trap. It feels built to be consumed more than remembered. It gives the viewer a clean hit of genre entertainment, but not the cinematic aftershock that makes people talk about it for days. That is the gap between streaming value and theatrical power. Streaming value is about convenience, accessibility, and immediate engagement. Theatrical power is about scale, impact, and memory. Apex has the first more consistently than the second. It is easy to watch, easy to recommend to survival thriller fans, and easy to fit into a casual movie night, but it is harder to argue that it demands the full big screen treatment. Still, the film is not without ambition. There are moments where you can see the bigger movie trying to break through. The wilderness photography, the physical action, the rapids, the survival set pieces, and the idea of a grieving climber being hunted through terrain she should understand. These elements could have supported a stronger theatrical thriller if the screenplay had been sharper and the emotional stakes deeper. That is what makes Apex slightly frustrating. It has enough production value to suggest a bigger experience, but enough formula to keep it grounded in streaming territory. It looks cinematic, but often thinks like a platform thriller. It has theatrical images, but streaming-level storytelling. It has a premise that could have filled a theater with tension, but an execution that feels more comfortable on a couch. Maybe that is exactly why the movie divides people so much. If you watch Apex as a casual Netflix thriller, it can be fun, tense, and visually impressive. If you watch it expecting a major survival film, it can feel thin, predictable, and underdeveloped. The experience depends heavily on the frame you bring to it. As streaming content, it is a solid ride. As theatrical cinema, it would need more bite. That is the final balance. Apex has enough star power, scenery, and action to suggest it could have reached for something bigger. But the writing, originality, and character depth keep pulling it back toward the world of disposable but watchable streaming thrillers. It is subscription-worthy, it is not quite event-worthy, and maybe that is the most honest place to leave it. Apex works best when discovered at home, with expectations tempered, as a polished survival thriller that delivers a decent rush. On the big screen, it might have looked better, but its weaknesses would have stood taller too. The final verdict on Apex is complicated because this is not the kind of movie everyone will agree on. Some viewers will walk away calling it a solid surprise, a tense, polished survival thriller with enough action, scenery, and star power to justify the stream. They will see Charlize Theron fighting through the wilderness, Taron Egerton bringing unstable villain energy, the Australian landscape giving the film scale, and the chase structure delivering the pressure they wanted. For those viewers, Apex works. It is not trying to be overly complicated. It is not asking for deep interpretation. It is a straightforward wilderness thriller with a simple hook. One woman, one predator, one hostile landscape, and one desperate fight to survive. If that is what you came for, the movie gives you enough to enjoy. But then there is the opposite reaction. Some viewers will see Apex as forgettable, predictable, and thin, the kind of streaming thriller that looks expensive enough to catch your attention, but does not have enough originality to stay with you. They will see the same hunted-in-the-wilderness formula, the same grief-driven protagonist, the same charming stranger who turns dangerous, the same convenient survival obstacles, and the same final woman-standing structure Netflix thrillers have leaned on again and again. For those viewers, Apex falls short. That is why the response ranges so widely. You can understand why someone might rate it highly as a fun, intense, rewatchable survival ride. You can also understand why someone might give it a low score and call it generic, shallow, or skippable. The film has real strengths, but they sit right beside very visible weaknesses. Its biggest strength is presentation. Apex looks good. The wilderness photography gives the film atmosphere. The cliffs and rapids create scale. The action has physical energy. The movie knows how to use its landscape as both beauty and threat. Even when the story becomes predictable, the visual surface keeps the experience alive. The film's second major strength is performance energy. Theron gives Apex credibility as a physical survival thriller. She sells the toughness, movement, endurance, and pain of Sasha's ordeal. Egerton gives the movie its most unpredictable spark. Ben may not be the deepest villain on paper, but he brings enough menace, charm, and theatrical instability to keep the hunt from going completely flat. But the weaknesses are just as clear. The script is too familiar. The character development is too thin. Sasha's grief works more as a plot device than a powerful emotional core. Eric Bana feels underused. The local authenticity is uneven. The pepper spray detail and other realism issues pull some viewers out of the story. The survival logic bends too far for convenience. And for a movie built around suspense, too many beats are visible long before they arrive. So the final judgment depends on what kind of viewer you are. If you want a clean, tense, visually attractive streaming thriller, Apex is worth watching. It has enough momentum to keep you engaged, enough danger to create a decent rush, and enough star presence to feel bigger than a generic survival movie. It works best with tempered expectations, something you press play on when you want atmosphere, action, and a simple fight for survival. But if you want originality, emotional depth, harsh realism, or a thriller that truly unsettles you, Apex may disappoint. It does not reinvent the genre. It does not fully escape its influences. It does not always earn the emotional weight it reaches for, and despite its title, it rarely climbs to the highest version of what it could have been. That is the honest conclusion. Apex is not a disaster. It is not a masterpiece either. It is a polished, watchable, sometimes gripping survival thriller trapped inside a very familiar formula. Its best moments come when the body, the landscape, and the chase take over. Its weakest moments come when the writing asks us to accept shortcuts, cliches, or emotional depth that has not been fully built. So where does that leave it? Somewhere in the middle, but an interesting middle. Apex has enough craft to avoid being disposable, but not enough invention to become essential. It is entertaining in bursts, visually strong, and carried by physical commitment. But it is also predictable, uneven, and too dependent on genre machinery. For survival thriller fans, it is a decent ride. For anyone tired of the same streaming formula, it may feel like another familiar climb. And maybe that is the perfect final verdict. Apex reaches a respectable height, but never quite earns the summit.